Morning, it's Robert Davies in the manshed this morning. I'm starting out here because I've got to get my bike ready for going out today. I'm going to meet Robert Perry, who has a really nice Scott Squirrel. But we're really going back to the 1930s, and I thought I'd just mention at first what we had here in Britain in the 1930s when you consider why aren't we leaders in motorcycle manufacture today. And I'd just like to read a couple of things that Angus Scott had on his motorcycle in the 1930s. He had a triangulated frame, rotary induction, unit construction, and the first kickstart. Imagine that in the 1930s. Also in the 1930s we had the Aerial Square 4, which had overhead cam, wet sump, and these things were there in the 1930s. So what went wrong? Well, I think a hint really of that is in this book by Bert Hopwood, Whatever Happened to the British Motorcycle Industry. And there's a couple of clues here what went wrong. I'll just read you two sentences. It says about its top management, it says, never at any time strong, deteriorated to such a degree that there was not a soul on the parent board who knew the first thing about single track vehicles. So the whole of the board weren't particularly interested in motorcycles. Now, to Bert, there was a chief executive of world famous group, and he tried to convince Bert of this. He says, he tried hard to convince me that it's ideal that top level management executives should have as little knowledge as possible about the product that they're selling. How ridiculous is that? We can see from that really that the Japanese went miles ahead of the British because they work as a team. They work together and there's no infighting. Anyway, we're going to have a look now at Robert Perry's really beautiful Scott. He tells me it's a bit of a handful, so I'm quite looking forward to that. Let's get to it. Where are we? We're in Wordsley, aren't we?
Yeah, Wordsley near Stourbridge, West Midlands.
Okay, the Classic Motorcycle channel today is in Wordsley near Stourbridge, and it's a very windy day, so I'm hoping my dead cat will keep things quiet. Now, for those that have watched this channel before, my cat won't be appearing in this production because basically cats are asking too much.
All right.
He wants too much money, and now that they're all on the internet, they're very arrogant creatures anyway.
Oh,
do you have a cat?
No, I don't have a cat.
Yeah, you're very wise, okay. Ours is very arrogant anyway, but he won't be appearing. So I'm here with Robert Perry, and we're with his lovely Scott Squirrel.
Scott Flying Squirrel,
Scott
1930.
Scott Flying Squirrel 1930. Now, you made a point of saying that it's a deluxe. So, well, what's the difference between the deluxe version and the ordinary version?
I don't really know. I've never quite found that out, but that's what it says on the logbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as you can see, we're young chaps, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Was it 92? And I'm just a little bit younger. Okay.
No, I'm not quite at 92 yet. I'm hoping to get there one day, but...
Okay. But the thing is, you see, Robert, is we're in a bit of a disjointed generation, aren't we? Because we're in a generation that we did everything to our motorcycles. We stripped them down, we took the spark plugs out, we adjusted them, and we did everything to them.
Yeah.
But the generation today, they've lost the gentle art of spannering.
Well, because the things are so complex, aren't they? The electronics and all that sort of stuff. I mean, these old machines are so basically simple. This Scott, it's a 500cc, two-stroke twin, which was quite unusual in those days. Water-cooled, as you can see from the radiator there.
Yeah.
But the engine itself has basically only got 5 moving parts, 2 pistons, 2 conrods, and a crankshaft. So it's very, very simple. No valves to wear out, no tappets to adjust or anything like that. And it's an amazingly reliable machine. I bought it when I was 16.
16. And this was, what year was this, Robert?
That was in 1960.
1960, and you were 16.
And I've had it ever since.
Right.
Now, some of the things I'm going to tell you about will make the committed restoration experts cringe a bit.
Okay, let's do that.
The fact is, this bike has always been a working bike.
Right.
I've used it, that's 60 years I've been riding it, right? I've had very little trouble with it. The crankshaft broke once about 10 years ago and I managed to get another crank. That's the third set of rims I've had on it. I did strip it completely down in my 20s, had the frame stove enamelled and a complete rebuild. But other than that, I now just patch it when it needs patching. I use it regularly. It's a working machine.
Well, I met you for the first time, didn't I? You were riding this bike at Phil's.
Yeah,
when I was doing
right.
that article about the hood, you see. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at some of the features of the bike, shall we?
Well, first of all, yeah, it's. I'll start it up in a bit because it's got a beautiful sound.
We'll have a start up in a bit.
First of all, I'd like to say a few things because lots of people come up and ask me. They're all interested in it, you know.
How much is it worth?
Oh, I wouldn't know. I'll never sell it anyway.
No.
But of course, it's got the girder forks.
Yes.
Which, for those folks who don't know, you can see the suspension. So you've got suspension on the front wheel, but nothing on the back. It's rock solid. It's got a very low centre of gravity. If you look, most of the weight is below the centre nuts and the wheel spindles. So it's got superb road holding.
Right.
It'll hold this road with any modern bike as long as the road isn't bumpy. Because if the road's bumpy, your back wheel is off the tarmac half of the time. It's very lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
It's very low centre of gravity. You can see how it is out, and it corners beautifully.
Right.
I think that's about all I need to say about it at that point.
Okay. And now it's only got 3 gears.
It's only got 3 gears, yes.
And
Well,
where do you change those, Robert?
on the right hand side, on the proper side, as I say.
The proper side. Okay.
Well, I always say to these Honda blokes, you want to get one with the gears change on the proper side, you know.
Okay.
But of course, it was originally a hand change machine. Right. This is the lug that held the hand gear change.
Yeah.
But before I bought it, it had been converted to a foot change.
Right, so this was originally a hand change?
It was originally, yes. No, I haven't changed it. When I bought it, it was already converted.
Right.
In fact, in the late 30s, it's actually made by Velocet, that gear change.
Okay.
And a lot of bikes, a lot of Scots and other bikes used to buy those gear changes and fit them onto their own machines.
Okay, right. And third gear takes it up to what sort of speed?
Oh, well, there's no speedo on it,
No
so
speedometer.
I don't know how far. Oh, 70 or something like that, 70 or 80.
Okay.
But
do we have to have a speedometer by law?
no, not if it's earlier than 1932.
That's an interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So hence I've got no mileage thoughts on it at all. But I used it as a commuter bike for years and years. Round Briley Hill, and when I taught over at Redditch College, which was about 15 miles daily. Apart from changing the chains regularly, right. I've had the magneto, which for those of you who don't know anything about old bikes is what generates the spark to send the sparking plugs and ignite the fuel. Okay. Change the cables every so often. I've put indicators on, of course.
Right, now that's a good idea, isn't it, really?
Well, of course, again, the purists would be very upset about it, but I've got so fed up of, because you're riding along, and then you got your hand out like this.
Right.
Of course, this shuts off and dies if you shut the throttle off. So you're out there, and then you're giving it a rev.
Yeah.
And I think some folks aren't used to hand signals, though. They just think you're waving at them.
Absolutely.
So
well, I took a Velocet 500 out the other day, you see.
Yeah.
And it had got the GP carb on, and of course it hadn't got a tick over. And I was riding it for the first time.
Yeah.
So turning right was a right pain.
Oh yes, absolutely.
It was a right pain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, I have a lot of fun with the modern bikers, you know, because I mix with them more than vintage bikers, really.
Yeah.
So they'll. I was over at one of the cafes the other day when two of these blokes were sat talking about their Kawasaki's or whatever they were, and the one said, "Oh, you ought to have a go on mine now. I've just bled all the hydraulics." And I said, "Well, you ought to have a go on mine when I've oiled all the cables." And of course they all say, "Well, what's all these levers on the handlebars here?" And I say, "Oh, that's the engine management system."
Right.
I say, you know, the ones that choke, the ones that advance and retard ignition.
So which is which then, Robert? Out of the levers?
That's the choke.
That's the choke on the right?
The throttle's on the right, a twist grip normal. Okay. And that's the adjust
advance and
retard ignition.
Okay, which is advance and which is retard?
Well, up is advance. And if you go too far, if you set it wrongly, of course, because a two-stroke only needs to have the pistons going up and down, it doesn't need to be go in any particular way.
Right.
So you can set it so that you kick it over and then it starts going backwards. You don't
Right.
realise it until you put it into gear and start to let
So-
the clutch out, and then it starts to roll away backwards.
Okay.
So that's fairly critical.
So there's a
I mean,
reverse gear if you want one.
well, some of the old Scott motorbike and sidecars used to do that particularly so they could reverse the bike, and
Okay.
so that's it.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the engine if we just come round this side a bit.
Well,
And-
I'll pop it on these
on the side stand.
blocks,
Yeah, okay.
so you can perhaps see it better.
Okie dokie.
Well, of course, we're on slightly slopey ground, but it's
I think you're all right on your side stand there, Rob.
okay. Right,
Okay.
well, there we are.
So here, if we come down to the engine, then we've
Yeah.
got obviously the jacket with the 2 cylinders in,
Yeah,
spark plugs
the
at
water
the top,
jacket,
and
yeah.
of course, beautiful little Scott there. What's this little thing here,
Well, this
Robert?
is a
That's
drain plug.
Okay.
Of course, the Scott blokes say if you want, you can stop and make a cup of tea, you know.
Oh, okay, that's useful. Okay.
But yeah, that's just a little drain tap if you want to drain the system.
Okay.
Now this, of course, the tank has got it's a 2-part tank.
Right.
If you look, you can see the
Yeah.
there's a tank inside the tank.
Yeah.
One's for petrol, the main tank.
Yes.
And then there's a smaller tank actually inside it that contains the oil.
Okay.
And the oil comes down this pipe here and goes to this, what we call a pilgrim pump,
Yeah.
which you can adjust.
Okay.
It's normally between 10 drops a minute
Right.
or to 15 if you want to use
So
a
that
bit more
mixes
oil.
your oil with your fuel.
No, it doesn't mix the
Ah,
oil.
okay.
What it does, it pumps the oil neat
Right.
through these copper pipes
Yeah.
straight into the main bearings.
Right. Okay.
And then out of the main bearings into the engine, so that's how it lubricates.
Okay.
Because a lot of Scott blokes converted to petrol, which of course is a mixture of petrol and oil.
Yes.
But and one or two said, "Oh, you ought to do that." But I thought, well, probably I probably thought at that time, well, it's been all right for the last 50 years, so I don't think I'm going to bother doing any modification to it.
Okay. So obviously, then you've got no idea how many miles you've actually done on this. I mean, it could be.
I wouldn't have a clue, not a clue.
Right. Okay. Of course, tiny little carburettor there.
Oh yeah,
Gearbox here at the back.
yeah.
Now, what's this aluminium structure
Ah, well,
here?
well,
Robert?
the magneto
Yes.
and dynamo are driven by this chain here,
Okay.
and there's a cog behind there where the drive is. Another thing that people are always amused by, the modern bikers, they say, "We got no air filter on no filter on the carb," and I say, "Well, it's never had a filter on it for the last 60 years, so I don't think I'm going to put one on."
Right. Okay. So as you say, we've got rigid end and plunger and girder forks at
Girder
the front. So there's no oil mixed in the petrol at all here.
No,
Right.
no.
Okay then. Now then, you're an interesting sort of like a chap, and we've not only talked about motorcycles. We'll have a look at you, perhaps your Ducati in a little bit, but you've also been an artist for the last how many years? 30 years.
Yeah, something like
The last
that.
30
Yeah,
years.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, you present. Well, let's have a look at one of your artwork, shall we? If we can just drag our cameraman over towards towards your art. So you've worked for yourself in the art world,
Yeah.
and you've done really quite well.
Well,
Now-
I wouldn't say I've done quite well, you know,
Okay.
you scrape along basically. I'm basically a landscape painter,
right.
and I travel all over Europe. You'd really need to do an article on my famous mobile studio, the Renault van that I've got.
Okay.
It's a vehicle that I've converted. I can work in it, eat in it, sleep in it. And I've travelled all over Europe. I'm very anti-war, of course.
Right.
And
Aren't we all?
so I've done a lot of work in the First World War battlefields.
Right.
All my work is always done on site, never from photographs. And so I say I'm quite well known in the Somme battlefields area and Verdun, which was the sort of the French equivalent of the disastrous Battle of the Somme.
So standing back and looking at this then, Robert, what is this a painting of? It's a
Well,
landscape, but
yeah,
it looks like the Black Country.
Yes, it's from Davies Hill, looking out over Tividale and towards, you know, not the Longmin, the Barbeacon and stuff like that.
Okay, right. Well, that's pretty fabulous then.
But I make my own easels. I've built a special easel to hold the that painting, if you get an idea of the size of it. I've done work I can do work up to 8 foot by 4 foot on a specially built aluminium easel that I made.
Okay. Now, you were telling me you did, because your art it tends to be impressionistic, you did a piece on a motorcycle, of course, and you presented it to the Motorcycle Museum. And
No, the Motorcycle Museum. Of course, I'm very much almost an abstract painter.
Right.
And what I love about bikes and engines of any sort, and structures, you know, cathedrals or, you know, oil cooling towers. I'm really interested in all these structures, and so drawing an engine to me is the same as drawing the frontage of a cathedral.
Right. So it's a piece of architecture.
Sort of,
Yeah.
yes, like a sculptural form, really.
Right.
But of course, he didn't appreciate that, and I asked him if I could go over there and work for a few weeks in the museum drawing the bikes. He said, "Oh yes, you can do if you want." I said, I showed him some of the work I'd done, and he said, "Well, yes, you can come and work here, and if you want, you can have an exhibition here if you want." He said, "But he said I can't think of anybody who'll give you more than 2 bob for any of that
£2
stuff."
That's in new money. That's what, 10 pence?
So of course he said, yeah, 10 pence. So he said, "Have a look at some of the stuff we've got in the, you know, in the shop." But of course, what they've got in the shop are highly technical illustrations,
Right.
with every detail and every nut and a cranny, whereas mine are sort of...
Do you fancy an ice cream?
According to the Scott instructions, first of all you turn on the oil, then you turn on the petrol, then you depress the tickler, which brings the petrol through into the float chamber. Then you retard the ignition, put a bit of choke on, with a bit of luck. Beautiful.
Music. The best thing then, Robert, is to take you for a ride.
Well, if you want to.
Well, at last we've got underway. Let's have a look where the wing mirror is. Better. And we're in second gear. I've got to remember that we've only got 3, but at least I am on my favourite road, the 458. I'm going to head for Enville, and then I shall turn round at Enville Common Road, I think. But this, yes, it definitely sounds like a twin, but it smells like my old Bantam of 1966 vintage. Well, that was really nice talking to Robert earlier on. He's an eccentric artist with a love for painting, obviously, and I enjoyed seeing his painting and pottering around his house. He's a fine artist. But now, of course, we're on the motorcycle. The Scott 500cc of 1930. We're just passing Enville Church, beautiful redstone church. I'm coming down into Enville, and there's some very sharp S-bend here, and some motorcyclists who haven't been prepared for these bends have had some pretty nasty accidents down here, especially when you hit gravel. There's the cat, it's Enville, and Enville Hall is just over there. Now that we've got the fuel on, the bike seems to be working a whole lot better, and there are some bikers in front of us. Now I'm sitting on just a sprung seat going into third, no rear suspension of course, and girder forks, and the girder forks are actually really quite good. I've always been impressed with girder forks, but of course the strange thing is, looking down here you'll see that there's no clocks, there's no speedo, there's no tacho. Now, as me and my wife were following Robert down here, he was doing a nice steady 45-50 miles an hour, and I think the bike likes to give a bit of willy. But it's comfortable, sports position, very thin tank, and it's nice to grip the tank with my knees. But the handlebars are close to your body, so you don't feel like you're leaning too far forward. It's a nice little note, burbling away in the background. And of course, the strange thing is that Angus Scott, was 50 years in front of the Japanese with this twin two-stroke arrangement. He realised the lightness of the arrangement and the power to weight ratio, and he was way before his time. Sadly, Mr. Scott died early at the age of 49 and with pneumonia. The company did carry on without him, but of course without his genius, and there's a lot of genius wrapped up in this motorcycle. And now it's time to say goodbye to Robert. And there he goes.